Hello there. Thank you for taking the time to join this session from Canyon Professional Development. This particular session is on dyslexia and other reading challenges. My name is Dr. Rebecca Dyer, and I'm a full professor in the College of Education at Grand Canyon University, and I teach courses specifically regarding special education. So our why with everything we do with Canyon Professional Development is to empower, educate, and inspire our community so they take action to fulfill their purpose and serve others. So as we get started, I want you to brainstorm and reflect. Think to yourself, how can a difficulty in the area of reading also impact other areas of a student's life? So maybe take a moment and pause the recording and reflect on that and brainstorm some ideas. The objectives for this session are: the first one is emotional, behavioral, and psychological impact that individuals with dyslexia and other language difficulties experience in educational situations every day. Number two, we're going to understand the signs of dyslexia. And number three, we're going to understand the elements of learning disabilities and how to support students with a variety of strategies. So first, we're going to take a moment to watch part of a documentary that's specifically about dyslexia. I really like this documentary because it includes actual individuals who have dyslexia, children all the way up to adults. And I think if you really want to understand what someone is experiencing, you need to try to put yourself in their shoes. And I feel like this really helps you do that. I won't be showing all of it just due to time, but I want to show some important parts. You can always look it up on YouTube or use this QR code. It's called Embracing Dyslexia. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to a different screen so I can show you part of that video.
One night, a woman fell from a boat into the ocean. No one saw her fall. The waves were rough. Soon she grew tight. Then something bumped against her. A shark, she thought. Oh no. It was not a shark, it was a dolphin. Grintily, it pushed her towards the shore. Shallow water. At last, she cleared up.
This is my son Alejandro. During first grade, we transferred him to a private school near our house. He was tested for reading and math, and we were shocked to find out that he was behind in reading. In an effort to help him catch up, he met with the school's resource teacher and he met with a reading tutor. Unfortunately, he was still behind at the end of first grade, so at the recommendation of his teacher and the principal, we held him back. I will always regret that decision because it is something that still haunts him to this day. Halfway through second grade, it was my mother who suggested to us that we have him tested for dyslexia. We did, and the results came back that he was indeed dyslexic. We went to his school and told the principal and his teacher that he had been diagnosed and that he was going to need accommodations, and the school was actually really good about that. At the same meeting, I remember asking the principal about the best way of telling Ali that he was dyslexic. And I remember the principal telling us that she didn't like to use the D word, and that labeling children is a bad thing and we shouldn't do it. I thought that was a really strange answer because here was a child who was struggling and he knew he was struggling. I felt that we should tell him, and we should help him understand what dyslexia is and what it means for him. So we did. Since then, Ali's confidence has soared. And with the help of the school's resource teacher, and now a private dyslexia tutor, he has become a much stronger reader and continues to improve. Learning about dyslexia and embracing it has changed our lives for the better.
The doctors couldn't help us. Arizona's abortion ban wouldn't let them. It was Christmas Eve when our baby's heart stopped beating.
And because they couldn't treat Ashley, I almost lost her too. No one should have to go through that.
Dyslexia is a neurologically based disability. It affects the ability of the child to, or the person to acquire written language. It's very hereditary, and it's generally, if there's a father who is dyslexic or a mother, one of their children is going to be dyslexic. Sometimes even it won't affect the mother and father, but when you talk to them, you find out, well, there's an aunt or there's an uncle or there's somebody in their family who has had a similar problem with acquiring written language. It can be unexpected in that the child appears to be very bright, which dyslexic children are very bright. And in many cases, the high cognitive ability can almost work against them. They're compensating so much, and people don't realize that they're really struggling. And so they may go on and perhaps do average work, but maybe they were meant to do more than that. Maybe they were meant to do above average work. And they were meant to be super, super successful students, and they never got that chance because the right tools were not there to find out what was really going on with them.
Before Kendall was diagnosed with dyslexia, she was frustrated. I was frustrated. It was very difficult. I assumed she was being stubborn. It was very hard on her when it came time to read because the teachers kept telling me, you need to spend more time with her. And I felt like we were adequately spending the time she needed to learn how to read. She just couldn't pronounce the words, follow the story. She didn't know how to read.
Early on in Logan's school career, I would say as early as preschool, we noticed struggles learning his letters, his numbers, retaining that information in his head. When we would talk to the teachers, almost always we would hear that he's not reading at grade level, that he's struggling with his spelling. We would also get some reports about behavior issues because he was struggling, and sometimes he would just give up, and then when there's nothing to do in the classroom because you don't understand what you're reading, a second grader, a third grader can become a behavior problem.
Jessica was in third grade when we kind of hit a wall here at home with homework. She had been fine up until then, and then it came to a point where she would just get frustrated almost immediately. She would spend hours just doing simple things that were sent home, and there were a lot of tears, a lot of late nights, a lot of fits. We slowly started to see her self-confidence just tank. I mean, it just went down and down and down. She started to feel really stupid and didn't want to go to school, and it was a hard time.
I noticed that Lauren was having difficulties between kindergarten and first grade. Actually, in kindergarten, her teacher approached us toward the end of the school year and said, I think that Lauren needs some extra help with reading. She's not grasping some of the concepts. She had difficulty decoding words. She would recognize a word and then not be able to say it again 10 seconds later. And that was when I noticed that there were some issues.
Before Cole was diagnosed with dyslexia, doing homework was a very stressful time of the day, both for us and for him. Part of it's because, we didn't know what his troubles were. We didn't understand it.
I had heard from his teachers that, he was being lazy, not wanting to do his work, so that's what I thought it was. And in reality, he wasn't grasping it. So it was frustrating for both of us as a parent. I thought he could do better, and because I was listening to them telling me he was lazy. So it was just very frustrating. And I remember him crying, and then I would cry, and then it became horrible. So it was not a good time at all for us.
First grade was much like kindergarten, with coloring and playing with the toys and all that. And I remember sitting at the table in the classroom, that's the way the teacher had everything set up. And we can play with the toys and stuff, but you had to finish your homework assignment, usually the classroom assignment. And I'm sitting here trying to figure out, well, I don't get it. I don't understand it. I'm looking at these words because at that particular time, I didn't know how to read. Now, I don't know if you're supposed to know how to read in the first grade. I knew I didn't know how to read in the first grade. So by the time I got to second grade, I was just there, just looking at this book and all these words and supposed to know this stuff. Because I didn't pass. I failed. In fact, they held me back. Then the rest of it is pretty much a blur somewhat, but I kind of figured out that I wasn't going to get this, and this is as far as I was going to go. So what I did was learn how to be quiet, try to be as invisible as possible. You know what I'm saying? Because you don't want to draw any attention to yourself. And I was aware that the other kids was getting it. I wasn't. And so drawing is what I pretty much started doing to keep other than just feeling like part of the furniture, giving myself something to do while I was sitting there. I knew there was a problem, but it seemed like nobody around me seemed to respond to it, you know. My mother was trying to be supportive of my circumstances because she knew something wasn't quite right. And I do remember her buying like paper and pencils and would sit me down and try to work with me and all this kind of stuff. But my father, his thing was, he just blamed me. He said I was stupid and dumb and never amount to anything because he was in agreement with the teachers and stuff. So, you know, he made it a lot worse than it should have been. Presently, I'm suffering from that. I'm paying a great cost because I'm shut out of everything because at 49, I have no formal education. Never been to high school, never been to college. My schooling stopped to me, in the second grade as far as I'm concerned. I think that's where it all stopped, to be perfectly honest. Because when I failed, somebody should have did something. When I was in grade school, I'd always wanted to actually be a pilot because I love
I'm going to go ahead and stop the video there, but definitely feel free to use that QR code to watch it on your own. Like I said, it really kind of opens up just a picture of what it's actually like to struggle with reading and have dyslexia and how great of an impact it has. As you can see, these adults are talking about how it impacted them all the way up through adulthood, obviously. So definitely feel free to take some time to watch that on your own. It is about an hour. But in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and jump back into the presentation. All right. So it's important to think about what are the statistics regarding reading and specifically dyslexia. So with 80%, we know that 80% of students with dyslexia go undiagnosed while they're in school. That is a high number and that is a significant number. So that's something we want to be thinking about when we're working with students is how can we make sure that we do see the signs so that we can provide the help that's needed. Another statistic is that 1 in 5 individuals, and this is all ages, have dyslexia. So it is very prevalent. It's something that a lot of individuals deal with. And again, we want to make sure we're looking for the signs so that we can provide supports to our students. So we think about dyslexia, obviously it's about reading. Reading is about literacy. So it's important that we understand what those words mean and how they're connected. So what is literacy? Literacy is the use of printed and written information to function in society, to achieve your goals, and to develop knowledge and potential. If you think about, just kind of picture everything you do when you go throughout your day, how many things involve literacy? You probably don't think about because they're just automatic things you do. But think about how that would impact you if you weren't able to read. It would have a significant impact. Our society relies pretty heavily on reading. And then we want to understand, well, what is dyslexia? So dyslexia is a term used to identify a reading problem that originates in an inability to recognize and spell written words accurately and quickly. So let's think about some signs. As you're working with students, what are some things that you may see that may be a sign that that student has dyslexia? One would be that they might be slow on oral reading fluency tests. You may also see inaccurate reading of real words and also nonsense words. We may see poor spelling, handwriting, and written expression. There's definitely a connection with dyslexia and obviously the reading portion, but that also connects with writing. You may see just an avoidance of reading because if someone struggles with reading and that's not a pleasant experience for them, we may see an avoidance, and that could be also behaviors that they are demonstrating behaviors to avoid reading. They may be weak in reading strategies and how to work through coming upon words they don't know. They may have a hard time doing that. And then we may also see a weak reading comprehension, especially when compared to how well they comprehend when they're listening. There's a big difference there between when they're reading it and when they're listening. So think about these different signs and things that you may see in students. They possibly could be a sign of dyslexia. This is a really helpful resource. It's the Ladder of Reading and Writing from Nancy Young. It's helpful to see how reading impacts students and all the different skills that are involved and really where our students fall. So if you look at the top in the green, about 5 to 10% of students they're going to be able to learn to read without a lot of struggle. They're going to probably pick it up pretty easily. That's only 5 to 10% of students. Then you have 35 to 40%. It's relatively easy for them to learn how to read. They may need some more specific or explicit instruction on some specific areas like spelling or writing. Then we get down into the orange, the 40 to 45%, they need explicit instruction for all the areas of reading. And then we have our 10 to 15% where they're going to struggle more with reading. We have to be very intensive with each skill and be very explicit in what they're learning. And it's going to take a lot more, you'll see right here, frequent repetition. A lot more hours are going to need to be spent with this instruction. So think about just one classroom and kind of how many students would fall in each area. And then we need to make sure we're addressing all of their needs when we're teaching reading. It's very important with all of our students to always focus on their strengths. Every student, every person is good at something. And we know that if we can help students build on their strengths, they're going to be more motivated. We're going to help to build confidence. It's going to be beneficial overall. So some strengths that are very specific to individuals with dyslexia is they definitely excel in areas that don't depend on reading. So that would be math, visual arts, computers, things like that. They also have excellent comprehension when something is read to them. So instead of spending so much energy trying to read it, they can just listen to it. Then we're going to notice a big increase in their comprehension. They have a larger than typical vocabulary for their peers that are the same age, which is kind of interesting. So that means a lot of times they're picking up on vocabulary they hear and they're able to use it. So they may have a little bit of an advanced vocabulary. They're highly articulate when it comes to expressing ideas and feelings. They often are really great at thinking of ideas that are outside of the box, helping to brainstorm to solve problems. And what are some areas where they may struggle? Again, some signs we may see. They might have some confusion between left and right. They may struggle with memorization. So if they're looking at spelling, so memorizing the spelling of words, or the math facts when it comes to memorizing maybe their multiplication tables, they may struggle with that. They do struggle with something we call executive functioning skills, and that's being organized, managing their time, being able to follow directions, especially if there's more than one or two steps. Those are executive functioning skills, and they may struggle with those. And then we know they struggle with reading. That can also include rhyming, any writing involved, and then being able to take notes in an organized manner. Here's some QR codes for some resources that are really helpful if you're looking for more information specific to dyslexia. There's the International Dyslexia Association, Learning Ally, and Understood is a really great website with lots of great information as well. So let's talk about what other learning disabilities are kind of associated with or have common characteristics with dyslexia. We know that we have dyscalculia, which involves math, and dysgraphia, which involves writing. So it's important to think about when individuals have dyslexia, it's usually not something that's going to just impact them in silo. It probably will impact other areas of their work, especially with their academics. So I want you to think about with the students that you work with, whatever grade level you teach or work with students you work with, how many of those students can actually read on grade level? So if you work with third graders, how many of them actually read at a third grade level? And what are you currently doing in your job or your role or in your school? What do you currently do to support those students who struggle with reading and writing? So you can take a minute and think about that and reflect on those questions. So it's important to think about how can we ensure when we're talking about students who struggle with reading, how can we ensure that they still are able to access their curriculum? We have to make sure that they're still able to learn the standards that their grade level peers are learning. You can scan the QR code here for a resource, and it will also be on this next slide. I really like these. These are just different ideas for differentiation, right? So we know we have to differentiate our instruction because all of our students are very different. So we have to make sure we use these strategies to support all those differences in one single lesson. So on the left of each of these documents are just things that we would probably ask students to do in an activity or in a lesson. And then on the right are ways that we could differentiate for our students. So I'll cover a few different examples, but you can use that QR code to access this resource as well. So we often ask our students to sit and listen, which can be very difficult for them. So if you look to the right, what are ways we can increase the way that they're able to access the information? And these are ways that we can differentiate. So maybe we give them alternative seating, give them time to take breaks and move around. And then here, right here, because we talked about this one as being something students with dyslexia may struggle with, if you're asking students to take notes, here's ways that you could differentiate for them. Graphic organizers are going to be very helpful because they struggle with organization. So how can we help them get that information down in an organized way? Maybe we also incorporate pictures into the notes to help them make some connections with the content as well. Here's a specific reading strategy. Again, you can scan this QR code to access this resource, and then we'll take a look at it together on the next slide. So you can scan that one. And then here's the actual resource. So this is a great way to help students with that reading comprehension piece. We know they benefit from hearing it, but we do also want them to work on their skills in comprehending when they actually read it. So as they hopefully increase their ability to have reading fluency, we want to make sure they're also able to comprehend it. So it's nice because it has an acronym of RACE. So hopefully that's easy for them to remember. So after they've read the reading selection, they're going to just follow the steps. So R stands for restate the question. It has a question right here that they're looking to answer. So they're going to restate it. That could be the way it's written, or they could write it again differently in their own words. Then they want to find the answer to the question. So they would write that here. We want to make sure they're citing evidence from the text. So maybe they write the sentence where they found that information here, and then explain their answer. And that's where we want them to do that in their own words to, again, look for comprehension. So really helpful, quick, easy strategy for them to increase their reading comprehension. And then we know we've talked about how dyslexia can also impact an individual's writing skills. So here's another resource. You can scan this QR code, and it's going to give you some ideas for helping students work through the writing process. So here's a way we can help students work through the writing process. So here's a question we could ask as a prompt, and you could use a prompt, or sometimes we give students maybe a selection of prompts and let them pick one. Sometimes that helps with motivation if it's something they're a little more interested in. And then you want to teach each of these skills, each of these steps of the writing process, one at a time. And you want to make sure you don't move on to the next one until they've mastered it. So you can start with pre-writing and work on that until you feel like they've mastered it. When they get that prompt, are they able to brainstorm ideas? Can we give them a graphic organizer to do that? Then you want them to work through each step, being able to do a draft, do revisions, write it again, do their own proofreading before they come up with their final product. So as you think about everything that we covered today, from how do we define dyslexia, how does it impact individuals who have dyslexia, we talked about different strategies as well. Think about 3 takeaways that you have from this session. What are 2 possible questions you still have? And one thing maybe you enjoyed or really stuck out to you during this session. And here's a QR code. If you would like to evaluate this particular session, you can scan this QR code here. And here's some other opportunities you can always take a look at that we have different courses available on demand. And you can scan this QR code to get that information. Thank you so much for joining this session, and I hope you enjoyed it and learned a lot. Thank you.